So today we are discussing parenting in the new normal. Elisabeth Swain is a leadership coach, and she'll be leading a roundtable discussion on the struggles, concerns, and unexpected silver linings we're experiencing as we navigate parenting in this unexpected time. So thanks, Elisabeth, for taking the time to lead this discussion. I'll pass it over to you.
Sounds good. So as Avi mentioned, my name is Elisabeth. I am a leadership coach, a nonprofit consultant and grant writer, and something that I'm also a mom. So I've got a 9-year-old son at home. I've got my 13-year-old daughter at home. And if those of you who are with us are in a similar boat, this idea of parenting in the new normal still seems anything but normal. So I'm hoping that what we can do today is talk about, as Avi said, some of the struggles that we have, some of the concerns that we're having for our children, but also some of the silver linings. And I really think there are some. I see them popping up on Facebook. I see them in conversations with friends, with clients. And I think there's a lot that we're going to take away from this time that will really make a difference and inform us going forward. So first, I'd like to welcome Kristen and Janella, who are here to talk with us as well. And then anybody else who would like to sort of jump in and say where you are and how, sort of what your situation is at the moment. So Sydney, Kara, Karyam, if you're interested in popping in to say hello, please do. Kristen, can you start for us?
Yeah, I'll give a little background on myself. I'm a former elementary school teacher. I taught for about 10 years in San Francisco, and then I moved to Rhode Island. I now live in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and I'm an administrator at a private school down the street in Portsmouth called the Penfield School. It's an elementary school for 3-year-olds through 8th grade. I also have children who are at home right now. 3 children. I have 3 boys. I have a 4th grader, a 6th grader, and an 8th grader. And this is the first time I've ever worked at home. I'm a very social person. I like interacting with the kids and my colleagues. So this is different being at home. I feel very fortunate. My husband is also here, so I do have support. We are able to kind of tag team to get through this time. So that's sort of my background.
Great, thank you.
And I'll jump right in. Hello there, I'm Janella Watson, and I am an education and media consultant. I am in the beginning throes of diving into consulting after 20 years in children's museums and science centers. And so I got a leg up and a jump start on all of you in terms of learning to work from home. I've been in this experiment of consulting for about 6 months. And still learning the ropes day after day in terms of finding that right sweet spot and balance. I have a 1st grader who is also having the time of his life during the shelter in place. And I'm supported by an amazing partner who is also an educator who works full-time from home right now for New Urban Arts and is supporting a whole host of youth as they go through this experience.
That's great. Is there anybody else who'd like to pop in and just say hello and let us know a little bit about your situation at the moment?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kareem Canston. I have 3 girls at home, 4, 2, and 8 months. And so just making it work with the wife, I guess.
That is
yeah.
Hey, Tootie.
Hi, Kareem. I'm not just the executive director of District Hall and Venture Cafe, but I also have 3 kids. One's 25, so he's still a lot of work, but he's on his own. And then I have a senior in high school, an 18-year-old, so that's interesting, and a 13-year-old 7th grader. I would say she's absolutely thriving, gets her work done in about 2 hours a day, gets to ride her horse 3 days a week, and is planting. There's lots of silver linings, but there are also struggles. Like my 18-year-old senior is not enjoying it at all. He has more work than he's ever had and is pretty stressed out, on top of the fact that he's a social beast and can't see his friends.
Yeah.
So looking forward to your wise words as always, Liz.
Thank you, Junie. So I think one of the things you may have noticed is that Kristen, Janella, and I all are involved in education. And that is not because we have some sort of like stronghold on information that we're gonna like download everything that's working perfectly for us. It's more so that we can be in here to let you know that even as people who have years of background in working with children, that it is still a struggle for us, because every kid is different and every situation is different, and there has never been a situation quite like this. So while we can impart the information that we have and hopefully some things that have worked for us and things that will definitely help support you during this time, there's an awful lot of needing our village. And I think something that Venture Cafe is doing really well is still in this time creating these villages of people to make sure that we have resources and places to look to when we have these struggles. So I would love to sort of start it out positively. As Tuni mentioned, her daughter is thriving during this time. What are some other things that you've seen from your kids that you sort of unexpectedly have really had an opportunity to grow in some way? I can say that for my kids, my son is 9 and he desperately loves his friends. They are at that age where he's doing this in the background. They're at that age where they want to be on each other all the time. And so it's been hard for him to not be near his friends and not have that physical contact. But he's sort of filled it in with stuff around the house, and being outside and really sort of loving to be observing what's going on around him in nature. So every day we go out and we look at different things that are happening, and he notices more and more every day. So it's this sort of external blossoming of his observational abilities, which has been really amazing to see. Does anyone else notice something like that with their kids?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I have 3 very active boys, and I now realize how crazy busy we were before. I mean, between my 3 boys, in the spring, we'd be on 7 sports teams, and we'd have like 4 to 6 games on a weekend. And that's just kind of how we lived. Like every second it was juggling who was going to what game. And I have truthfully really enjoyed being home, particularly on the weekends when we have some free time and some downtime. We are doing the same thing. We're trying to get outside as much as possible, which is obviously getting easier now that the weather's nicer. But in the last 3 days, we've gone on family bike rides. We never ever had time to do that before. And the kids, and it's fun, the kids sometimes, or we've been doing a lot of family walks, and they might complain at first. By the end of the activity, they've been chatting, they're having so much fun with each other. I feel like they're actually fighting a little bit less. And it's just been so nice for all of us to just take a level down. And really, we feel very fortunate, I say this every day, that we live in Rhode Island right now during this time, as opposed to somewhere where it wouldn't be as easy to get outside. So I think for us, that has been terrific for the kids. And then another smaller piece, but is we're living a little bit like Chopped. We just sort of at night kind of cook what we have in our refrigerator. We really are trying not to go to the grocery store. We're using a lot of local sources like Pat's Pastures and Simmons Farm and these places that have been delivering to us fantastic food. But we don't always know what we're going to get. And I found that the kids have been much more adventurous in their eating and willing to offer to help out and cook, which it's been very fun. Like we've had a lot of great family time, which is not something I would have anticipated in early March when we heard this was all going to happen.
I think echoing, Kristen, your comments and Kareem's, recognizing that, I started by saying my son is having the time of his life, and it's true. It's taken us a little while to establish the kind of routines that we all need in order to feel safe and like we have space to explore and to thrive right now. And so a lot of our time in these first weeks have been in creating new routines with our kiddo, and making sure that he knows that there are some things he can count on from day to day. And our little guy is a special needs student within Providence Public Schools. And so making sure that his needs are being met, not only on the academic front, but truly on a more holistic front in terms of his work. His sincere area of practice right now is in socio-emotional development. And that's really been thrown for a loop in terms of what he was just learning about interacting with his peers and with his friends. And so, as Kareem was saying, like, our kids are loving this time at home with their parents, with dedicated attention and more opportunities for play. I think my husband and I feel like we're walking a tightrope in terms of being active and engaged playmates and right now first teachers to our kiddo, but also taking time for ourselves and making sure that we're modeling that for our kiddo as well. One of the silver linings is that for the first time, Grayson is closing the door to his bedroom and taking time to himself and for himself, and playing a little bit more independently than all of his calls for board games have always kind of demanded of us. So that's a piece of the silver lining that we're finding as a family.
That's great. And I think, you know, there are these threads, right, of the silver linings, and then there are things that need to change every day. As you said, you're creating routines and schedules so that there is some consistency, which I think across the board is important, whether your child is 2 or 18. But there's also this need to respond to the day. And I think that's something that, you know, we all, in the first days of the quarantine and of distance learning, we all saw that Facebook post that had the really nicely colored schedule, which then became the meme of, is this person insane? It's never going to happen. And then, you know, sort of ripping that apart for a little while. And now as we're settling into it, I think, you know, we're all hopefully starting to find some sort of groove, but also seeing what for our kids has been really important. So I myself have gone through a couple of iterations of our schedule. My daughter, she's 13, she goes into her room and closes the door and just gets it done. My 9-year-old, not so much. So he needs my constant feedback. And you know, it's those things that teachers put in report cards that we see at home now and we're like, oh, that's what they meant. And mine was, Gus is so enthusiastic, but he has a hard time not talking about his enthusiasm. And I'm like, oh, this is what they meant. He is really into his work, but he is like me and somebody who processes things verbally. So every 3 sentences, he wants to read to me what he's written, or, you know, just tell me something he's excited about. So in the beginning, with my morning work time, I'm most productive in the mornings. I was trying to get all of my most important work done while he was working. And we tried that for about a week and then really quickly realized that that was not going to work. So I've had to shift my schedule around what he needs. And I think that's something that we're all, you know, figuring out a little bit, balancing our needs and what we need to do as professionals who are still trying to get things done, and balancing what the kids need, and that, you know, we can't ask them to ignore us for 3 hours so that we can get something done. And I'm wondering what's worked in some of your different households to get those schedules organized, even if it's just what's working today. So I do like getting up early, but it's always a bit of a struggle. I have to do it now. I have to get up at 5 or 5:30. My husband gets up at 4:30 and leaves for work at 5. So I get up when he leaves and I get started so that I can have a bulk of my work done before the kids start school. It's still a work in progress, but it's, you know, those little shifts that I feel like we've been having to make. Have any of you had to make similar shifts?
We certainly have, oh,
Nope. You go.
Janella, why don't you go ahead?
you got it. Happy to. So my partner took on a full-time role at his organization the week before the orders to shelter in place came across. And so he is learning the ropes of a new role and simultaneously trying to juggle my consulting work. We recognized very quickly that my husband and I also have very different approaches and styles in teaching, and that we're different learners. And so we're trying to exercise each of our strengths in terms of which subjects we're tackling with our kiddo. I get most of the writing, and my husband is helping our kiddo through the morning hours in all of the ways that he needs to connect with others. He also has been printing off the worksheets and kind of wrangling all of the instant tech that we are like quite novices at utilizing. And so he's been taking the first half of the day, the first 3 hours of at-home instruction and coordination, while I tackle, like you, Liz, my work the best in the morning hours. And it hasn't gone seamlessly, definitely. There was a point a few weeks ago that I think I was sharing a little bit with Liz, where I was on a Zoom with more than 100 folks at Sesame Workshop in my role as an advisor there, while my husband and my son were each on their own conference calls in the other room. There definitely have been moments of interrupting each other. I described to the Sesame folks the loudest collage making that you could ever imagine happening in the living room while I presented from the dining room. And just being gentle with ourselves in terms of finding a balance and a rhythm in each day. I think overarching, trying to be gentle with ourselves and recognize that we can do amazing things, but we also are learning beings who are experimenting and practicing so many things right now.
Absolutely. Kristen, did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have tried, this is sort of Monday through Friday when we're working, and school days, weekends are a little different, but we've really tried to have a pretty set schedule that is very similar to kind of how it was when we were in live school. I mean, the kids get up at the same time, they have the same sort of things they have to do in the morning before school starts and whatnot. And my husband and I, every single morning, we sort of check with each other's schedules so we know who's going to be available to help the kids win, and we let the kids know. But obviously we're flexible. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if any second now my 4th grader opens the door and asks for help. I mean, he kind of knows he's allowed to peek, and sometimes they say come, sometimes like, hold on. So we're sort of, it's a little bit of a balance of trying to have a pretty set routine, but also being flexible when need be. And of course, our plans in the morning often shift. And it just so happens, typically my husband tends to have a lot of his meetings in the afternoon and I have mine in the morning, so that works well. But our Zoom calls are obviously always shifting around and we have to make adjustments. But in some ways, and then we have to make adjustments for the kids, but it helps sort of break up the monotony of it too. So I think we're trying to do this balance of keeping things very scheduled and routine, like in our house, but also break up the monotony. So it's not always the same. And as I said before, I mean, our big thing is getting us all outside. Even if the kids run around outside for 5 minutes between classes, I find that really helps them. But certainly some days go much smoother than others. I do feel like we have gotten into our rhythm now. I mean, the first couple weeks were a little rough. And then of course you always have the internet issues. That's when I get the banging on my doors. We're supposed to be in English class or music class or whatever it is. And I think we've all just learned to be much more flexible and a little bit more spontaneous than we used to be, which at least for me is a good thing because I am a very kind of scheduled, rigid person. So this has helped us be a little bit looser and go with the flow. And you just you need to kind of go with the flow right now.
Yeah, I've really noticed that I agree with you. I think there's this go with the flow that has been present in all of the meetings that I've been a part of and all of the conversations that seem to have a new level of compassion to it. I love seeing the kids pop into Zooms, and I'm hoping that when we go back to work, whatever, in whatever capacity that means, that this will continue, that there's a new awareness of what it means to be working and a parent. Are there any things that you've seen sort of along those same lines, shifts that you've seen that you're thinking are going to continue once the stay-at-home orders are off, sort of hopefully for good, and we all continue back to our offices?
Well, I mean, I think partly I want our life to slow down a little, if possible. I know it can't stay at the same pace we're at right now, but I realize that our pace we were at before was just too much, and we were so sort of in it that we didn't really realize. I think that'll be really important. I also feel like I've personally reconnected with a lot of people, not former friends, but friends that I've just sort of haven't talked to over the years, and everyone now has a little bit more time in the evenings, and I've been doing these, some of these sort of silly but yet fun, these little Zoom cocktail parties with friends that I probably wouldn't have normally been reaching out to. And I think that has been really great for me. And actually, ironically, I've noticed my kids have become even more social because they're so desperate to see their friends that as soon as they get out of class, they'll ask me if they can Zoom with friends, where it used to be on weekends. I said, you guys want to do a play date? And they're like, no, we're fine. We're just going to do what we're doing. But it's been nice to sort of reconnect. And even I'm very close with my brother, but I didn't used to talk to him that often on the phone. And now we've been connecting almost every single night for about 10 minutes just to kind of talk about our day. We really don't have a whole lot to talk about. We typically talk about what we're going to make for dinner. But it's just, I've really enjoyed reconnecting, and I hope that continues.
We I think are juggling a little bit of a tightrope with that. We have these wonderful Sunday calls with our extended family, great grandma on down, and that has been something that I have faith wouldn't have happened without these extenuating circumstances kind of driving us all together and giving us new ways of connecting with each other. I'm also, and I know my kiddo is as well, what we're calling Zoom-a-fried. This is a unique and really taxing way of connecting with each other. I don't even think we recognize all of the ways that this is different than being able to interact with people face to face, even trying to look some of you in the eye and spark that sincere connection. As I look at your little, your little faces in the frame, I recognize that I'm not making eye contact, and I'm reading social cues in a different way and body language in a different way. And I find my kiddo is going through that too. Despite all of the wonderful things, the silver linings that we're finding in this time together, I have only one child, and he's expressing quite freely and sometimes surprisingly the ways that he feels lonely right now. And I think that the social and emotional dimensions of what we're all going through, and the fact that no matter what your circumstances are, how many kind of layers or levels of privilege and opportunity your family has, that this is actually a traumatic experience for all of our children, and what it means to support them through the huge emotions that are only going to be natural. I know that I've taken time to cry and but not only to cry in the sense of kind of loss and grief for some of the ways that our lives were before that we won't be able to recapture again, but also just the frustration of wanting things to be different and knowing that it's going to be some time again before we're able to actually connect with each other. I think that it's in his learning to express what he's feeling, those fears, and how I respond to them as a parent, giving him enough information to understand what's going on, but not too much, so that I'm not making him as anxious as I feel from moment to moment during this crisis, that I'm trying to keep centered in the holistic ways that we want our kids to learn and grow right now.
Yeah.
I find one of the hardest things, my children are a little bit older, so they're asking a lot of questions, and my biggest fear, and that I try to keep from them, is the fear of the unknown. I mean, I sort of feel like right now we have our pattern, we're safe, we're home. I feel very fortunate. My family's all safe. My extended family's also all staying home and safe, but the fear of the unknown, what's going to happen in the upcoming weeks, months, year to two. And particularly my older one, he's having by far the hardest time. He's been quite depressed during all this. And, we don't have answers. I mean, and I think he's old enough, it's okay for me to say that, but personally, that's my biggest fear. It's just the unknown starting soon.
Right.
Kristen, it makes me, in conversation with my kiddo, with my friends, with my family, I have to remind myself that even though I'm mourning the loss of some of the things I was very much looking forward to professionally, personally, that it's my skills and gifts that actually made me poised to enjoy those things. And they are things that I will have probably even sharpened through this experience. That it is, that I will be, I hope that I will grow through this experience, and that those kinds of opportunities will rise again. Even if it feels really uncertain in this moment, that we will come through this. And so taking stock of what I'm learning through each of these really challenging experiences, and helping my kiddo also take stock of the ways that he's learning and growing right now. It's my way of reminding myself that, the sun will shine again. It is Rhode Island after all,
Yeah.
We're lucky.
Exactly. And I think that's, something that we hear over and over again is the importance of not only supporting our children, but supporting ourselves. And that's probably the hardest piece to get to, because we are so consumed, sort of first with our kids, then with our work, then with the litany of other things that need to get taken care of. And by then it's 9 o'clock at night and I'm ready to go to sleep. So I think, we've got to, and I'm sure we all do this in a myriad of ways, and have found a lot of different resources. But something that I would love to remind everybody is that even if it means letting your child know that you just need 5 minutes, that it's okay to take those 5 minutes, that your own, it's the filling the cup. You can't give to somebody else unless your own cup is full. But before I go any further, and I know we're sort of starting to run out of time, so I hope I can find a way to continue the conversation. I think there's a lot that we've brought up and a lot that we haven't had a chance to talk about. But I would love to introduce Dr. Jennifer Berton, who's also here. Jen, can you get on for a minute and just say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry I was late. I had an internet I don't even know what. I think we've killed the internet in my household. We have 4 of us that are pretty much on Zoom all day long. But yeah, my name is Dr. Jen. I am founder of the Rose Center for Learning, which is here on Aquidneck Island, and I give counseling, individual and group counseling. We have a parent group that's very much like this that runs weekly. And I train all sorts of clinicians on how to be better clinicians. And I'm also a parent to 2 kids. And yeah. And
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here.
And so I know, Avi, that we're probably starting to wrap up somewhat soon. And I would love to give everybody who's here who maybe hasn't had a chance to talk or who may have a question that they would like to put out to the group to get some support. Is there anyone who would like to address something that we haven't talked about or ask for some support?
What about when this all goes back to some semblance of normal? Like, so as someone who has a team of 6, and Avi and Amy both have kids. I've already decided that we don't all need to go back in all the time because of the benefits of working remotely. So, you know, that's a conversation that I think needs to continue not for us because we're mindful of it and we're, you know, flexible and agile, but all those other businesses that, you know, we can't let them lose sight of the benefits of letting their employees work from home, if that makes more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just what you said, it's conversation. You know, hopefully we feel comfortable enough in our work environments if, you know, we're the one going back into an environment that's being sort of organized by somebody else, to say, hey, can we talk about what worked and what didn't work? I think the most important thing to remember is that the new normal is not normal. We're not going to go back to what we knew before. And that in and of itself is its own sort of emotional hurdle to get over. Worrying what will it look like and wanting it to be the way it was. But once we get past that piece of it, there's this upswelling, it seems, of discussion around, well, what do we want it to look like? So I think encouraging those conversations, starting them early before we even get there, is a good way to make sure that, you know, at least there's some discussion around it. At least we're going to be able to identify what worked and what didn't work, and hopefully keep some of those things that did.
You know, I have a question for folks, and this maybe pertains to people who are in co-parenting households. And I think that in general, it's true that women take on a larger burden of childcare, even if they are working full time. Are people seeing this shift to something of assembling some form of equality with both parents working from home? Are you all seeing a shift a little bit? Maybe not.
Yeah. I can say, for just to start off personally, like I said, my husband leaves at 5 in the morning and doesn't get home until 4:30 or 5 in the afternoon. And so it is me the bulk of the day. Is there anyone who's at home with their spouse or their partner and seeing any shift?
I am. And it's interesting, you know, we sort of, in our marriage, very quickly kind of fell into our roles. It was never discussed. It's just sort of the way it became. And I am very lucky. I have a very hands-on husband with my kids. He's very helpful and he's wonderful. But I do feel like our roles, we're both just kind of jumping in when we need to jump in. It's very kind of even. I would say we are sharing the load. I have to say I feel very fortunate. But I would say that there has been a sort of a slight shift. And one role I've always had, and I think it's because I was a teacher, I've always been the homework person, always. And now he's having to do a little bit more of that because, you know, homework, classwork is kind of an all-day thing now, and I'm sometimes busy in the morning. So, for example, yesterday my 4th grader had to write a paragraph on a current event, and we tried to find one that wasn't Corona related, which was difficult. But anyway, I couldn't help him. And I think it was sort of one of the first times that my husband had sat down and helped with a writing project. Normally he always did the art and I did everything that wasn't art. And I think it's kind of nice to actually mix it up. But yes, I would say it's very evenly balanced right now, which is wonderful. And again, I feel very lucky. I certainly have full appreciation for that.
For me, I think, sorry, you want to go?
Oh, please go ahead, Jennifer.
For me, I would say my husband's a musician, and so we both have always sort of had strange hours and have been good at figuring out who's going to be with what kid at what time, and sort of we have an odd schedule probably from most people's standards. But the difference I have seen is, to me, monumental, and that is that even though he's always been a super hands-on dad, and husband, I still have to tell him to do things and then he'll do them, but it's always, I still am sort of running the whole ship, even if I'm equally working parent. And that's changed. So now it's more, we sort of have a family meeting together every night. Or when he comes in the door, he'll say, okay, what can I do? And that, or he'll just jump in, and that for sure is different rather than waiting for me to tell him what would be helpful. He just is jumping in or asking first.
Our situation is definitely different than most. My husband was a stay-at-home dad for the first 5 years of Grayson's life. And it meant that he was the one working with the speech therapists and continuing to practice all of the approaches being used in order to really, I credit him for most of the words that Grayson speaks, and you can't quiet him now. And so we're really getting acquainted with new ways of being all together. I mentioned in the beginning that I'm transitioning to consulting, and so it is a very different way of living and being in terms of many more Zoom calls and writing proposals and negotiating contracts right now. My husband has always described me as either the starting quarterback or on the starting line for our family professionally. And that has meant really striking a very different looking and feeling balance in terms of who's driving the day-to-day in our household. I find that right now I'm treating it like we're in a series of experiments or ways of practicing being together and bringing our strengths to the table, but also giving each other time and space to not be on all the time. My husband, as he's started this new full-time position, which is definitely a new experience for him after so many years at home, I recognize that he's also learning how to balance his time and energy and make sure that he still has time for his own creative pursuits, which are the things that really, make his heart sing, sewing or creating music or otherwise.
I think we've sort of run the gamut a little bit in a lot of ways. Some of the things that I'd love to make sure that we all think of as we close up the conversation, that when we're looking at scheduling, that we can really play to our strengths, and especially in terms of divvying things up in the household, as Janella was saying, and Kristen said this as well, that you can feel what works best for you and what works for the other adult in the household if they're around for those times, so that your zone of genius is really sort of shining when you're working with your kids, so that you're modeling your best work and trying to be flexible, and that we're really trying to keep a sense of changed pace, a sense of compassion, that we're enjoying reconnecting and really having an opportunity to live as much as we can a little bit more intentionally with what we do at the time that we're not working, and with our children. Does anybody else, was there anything that jumped out as a nugget or something that you'd like to share before we close up?
I think it's just really important to once again just say you have to take care of yourself first, because then you will be so much more present for your family, who needs you. But find, I find even a 5-minute break here and there when I can grab it makes such a difference. Even if I just sit here and stare out my window. So find that for yourself.
Small goals are good. 5 minutes is a great place.
I would prefer more than 5, but if I'll take 5, if that's what I can get.
Yeah, absolutely.